Did you know there's a proven diet that can easily melt off visceral fat after 40? It's not keto, it's not carnivore, and it's definitely not about eating super clean either. Sound too good to be true? Well, stick with me because I'm gonna break down this diet step by step and show you why it's the easiest and most sustainable way to lose visceral fat. It's the exact plan my clients in their 40s, 50s, and 60s follow to lose visceral fat fast without starving themselves, cutting out their favorite foods, or doing tons of cardio. And it's the same approach I use to go from an overweight kid who's terrified to take his shirt off at the pool to staying lean year-round with ease. Now, fundamentally, you cannot lose visceral fat without a calorie deficit. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. This is the non-negotiable. Visceral fat is still stored energy, and your body only taps into those stores when it needs more energy than it's getting from food. I promise you, if you eat super clean but are not in a calorie deficit, your visceral fat won't decrease. No matter how optimized your hormones, sleep, or training are, if you're not in a deficit, you won't lose meaningful visceral fat. Some people claim they're in a deficit but aren't losing visceral fat, and in almost every case, that is not because the deficit doesn't work. It's because of one of three things, and the first thing is that they're not actually in a true deficit. Most people underestimate their calorie intake by about 20 to 50%, so they think they're eating maybe 2,000 calories, but they're actually eating at maintenance or in a calorie surplus. So you can't lose any fat, visceral or otherwise, if you're not actually in a deficit. The second reason is that they're losing fat, just not from visceral stores yet. So your body decides where to pull fat from first. You cannot spot reduce. Some people lose more subcutaneous fat first, the fat under your skin, before the actual visceral fat starts to drop. But if you stay consistent with the calorie deficit over time, your body will eventually pull from your visceral fat stores. It's inevitable. The third reason is that they're actually recomping, which means gaining muscle while losing fat at the same time. So when you train properly with weights and you eat well, you can gain lean muscle mass while dropping fat. The scale doesn't move much, and sometimes visceral fat readings actually lag behind. But underneath, your body composition is still improving. You're just trading fat for muscle. Now, visceral fat is more hormonally sensitive, so high cortisol, poor sleep, and insulin resistance can delay how quickly you lose visceral fat. But these things do not override the calorie deficit. They just slow the process down. So once you fix your sleep, your stress, and your overall lifestyle, and you keep the deficit on top of that, visceral fat always comes off. So here's the bottom line. The calorie deficit is the engine of fat loss. Food quality, sleep, and training do not replace it. They just help that engine run smoother. You can't choose where to lose fat first, but you can create the environment where your body prefers to burn visceral fat sooner. So what we're really solving for at the end of the day is for the most enjoyable, most sustainable way to stay in that deficit. Because if you don't find that, you will always struggle. And that's exactly what I'm gonna walk you through in the rest of this video. I'm gonna show you the simplest, most enjoyable, most sustainable way to actually stay in a calorie deficit so you can finally lose your visceral fat. The first step is to hit the right calorie deficit. So the size of your deficit depends on how much fat you have to lose. If you have more than 30 pounds to lose, you can go faster. You can put yourself in a more aggressive calorie deficit. But if you're closer to your goal, let's say you have 20 pounds or less to lose, I would strongly recommend going slower and doing a more moderate sized calorie deficit. Because if you go too fast with your fat loss, with your deficit, when you're not obese, you will lose muscle, you will screw up your diet a lot because you'll be hungry all the time, and you'll be more likely to rebound if you do muster up the willpower to get to your goal through basically starving yourself. So unless you're obese, the long road is generally faster. This is one of the most powerful lessons I've learned when it comes to fat loss. I used to put myself in these crazy aggressive calorie deficits, and it would always backfire. What I've learned with experience after having done this for like 10 years now is that the long road is so much faster. It can be so tempting to want to put yourself in a really aggressive calorie deficit so that you burn fat quicker. And honestly, you might burn fat quicker, but it comes with a cost. It comes with those costs I just told you about. Muscle loss, extreme hunger, which causes more diet screw-ups, and a higher likelihood of actually rebounding if you do get to your goal. Moderate deficits habits are just a lot more sustainable. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to actually find the right calorie intake for you. So the first thing that you need to do when it comes to finding the right calorie intake for visceral fat loss is you need to find your maintenance level. So what I found, and this is honestly just like a general guideline, it's not always 100% accurate, but it's a really good place to start, is take your body weight and just multiply it by 15. This is a really, really good starting point for finding your maintenance calories. And then this is obviously going to give you around your maintenance calories. And then what you want to do is you want to subtract 400 calories from this number. Now, if you have more than 30 pounds to lose and you're more on the obese side, I would recommend taking your goal body weight and then multiplying it by 15. Now, this might be incredibly accurate for you, or it might not be accurate at all, but it is a really good starting point. And what I would recommend is that if it's not accurate, all you want to do is just adjust up or down until you're losing about 1 to 2 pounds per week. Real quick, guys, this free advice can get you started, but if you want real transformation, you need advice tailored to your exact situation. That's what I give my clients, and that's why they get such great results. So if you're ready to finally transform your body after 40, click the link in my description below, book your free fit call with me, and lock in your spot. Now, the next step is to hit the right protein intake. So protein is absolutely crucial for keeping your muscle during fat loss, but you don't actually need as much as most fitness influencers say. 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is pretty much as optimal as it gets for maintaining or building muscle mass during a fat loss phase. Now, where protein can shine is for satiety. So if you're like me and you have a really big appetite and you find it really difficult to stay full in a calorie deficit, I recommend bumping your protein intake up to about 1 gram per pound of body weight. This will help keep you full. So very, very simple. All you got to do to find your ideal protein intake is take your body weight and then multiply it by either 0.8 or 1 gram. Now again, if you have more than 30 pounds of fat to lose, I would recommend taking your goal body weight and then multiplying it by 0.8 to 1 gram. So now that you've set the ideal calorie and protein intake for losing visceral fat, the third step is to actually track your calories and your protein. So if hitting the calorie deficit is the most important lever for losing visceral fat, actually tracking it is a very, very close second. Most guys think they're in a deficit, but they're actually not. So many men have all these different excuses as to why they're not able to lose visceral fat, when in reality, the truth is that they're just not actually in a deficit. There's a huge discrepancy oftentimes between what they are eating and what they think they're eating. In other words, if you think you need to do 2,500 calories per day in order to lean down, and you think you're hitting that, but you're actually not losing fat, chances are you're doing closer to 4,000 calories. I see this time and time again with the men over 40 that I work with. Oftentimes, tracking is the number one thing holding their progress back. They're either not tracking accurately or they're not tracking everything. So they have a snack here, a snack there, a bite here, a bite there, oils here, sauces there, and before you know it, they're just not in a deficit, right? Or they're just not tracking things accurately because they just don't know how to track properly. So you don't need to track meticulously forever if that's not something that you want to do. But you do need to track long enough to develop awareness around how much you actually need to eat in order to lose fat. And if you're someone who just wants to guarantee that you see the fastest rate of fat loss possible, I would strongly recommend tracking your calories and protein. Use a software like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or whatever, but actually make sure that you're weighing or you have some way of accurately measuring the food that you're consuming and then actually tracking it in a software of some kind. Step 4 is to eat the foods you love. So I would strongly recommend that you base your diet around the foods that you actually enjoy. This is the biggest sustainability hack that there is. And I have this moniker that I throw around in all my YouTube videos and that I tell my clients repeatedly, which is, if you can't do it for life, then don't do it for a day. Cutting out the foods that you love guarantees that the diet will fail on a long enough time horizon. Because by definition, you're making the diet unsustainable because you're cutting out the foods that you like. You're cutting out the things that make you enjoy life. And so the best diet is not the cleanest diet. It's not the one with the most rules. It's the one that you can actually stick to. And the only way to be able to stick to your diet long term is to include the foods that you like. If you hate your diet, you're not going to stick to it. I don't care if you can stick to your diet for 2 weeks. I don't care if you can stick to it for 2 months. I don't even care if you can get to your goal if it means that you're just going to rebound back afterward because the diet is not sustainable long term. Now, what most people don't understand is that the diet that you use to get in really good shape is the one that you'll need to continue following for as long as you want to stay in good shape. And this doesn't mean you're going to be in a fat loss phase for the rest of your life. This doesn't mean you're going to be in a calorie deficit all the time. But fundamentally, whatever approach you used to get in great shape is the one you'll have to continue doing after you reach the shape that you want. You cannot just go back to the diet that got you fat to begin with and expect to somehow maintain your results. You're gonna have to continue following those same habits, even if you're eating some more calories, even if you're eating at maintenance or you're eating in a calorie surplus. The diet is fundamentally going to remain very similar. The difference between you being in a calorie deficit and being in a calorie surplus, might be like 400 to 600 calories. It's really not that much. And so whatever diet you follow to get in good shape is the one that you'll have to continue doing. And that's why it's so important that you actually enjoy your diet. And so I have a story around this. My dad, who is 53 years old, followed this exact system that I'm laying out for you right now and lost about 30 pounds in 90 days and achieved the body of his dreams. And in that process, he ate a big ass bowl of ice cream every single night. In fact, all the foods that he ate to get to his goals, to lose that 30 pounds, were the exact same foods that he would eat on a day-to-day basis if his goal wasn't to lose fat. And that's incredibly powerful because he never felt like he was dieting. And that's my goal for you as well. This is what I work on with my clients. We do not want you to feel like you're dieting because it's not going to last. The fifth step is to follow a simple eating structure and then eat the same thing every day. So you need to find the eating structure that best suits you and your lifestyle. Technically, meals per day and meal timing don't actually matter that much when it comes to fat loss. You could eat 10 meals a day or you could eat 2 meals a day. And as long as you're in the same calorie deficit, you're gonna lose an equal amount of fat with both approaches. However, your meal structure does impact your ability to hit the deficit. Now, this depends on your lifestyle and when you personally like to eat, but I would strongly recommend that if you have a big appetite and you find it difficult to be in the calorie deficit because you struggle to stay full, I would strongly recommend do fewer but bigger meals each day. The ultimate goal when it comes to losing visceral fat or fat of any kind is to go to bed each night feeling satisfied while still being in the deficit. That is the goal. If you can find that, then fat loss will be unlocked. It will be very, very easy. So you want to find what allows you to do that, what allows you to go to bed feeling full while being in a deficit, and then just repeat that every single day. Now, obviously, like I said, this is going to depend largely on you and your personal preferences and your lifestyle, but I will share what I have found to be the most effective for allowing me to go to bed feeling full each night while being in a calorie deficit. So what I like to do is when I wake up, I don't eat breakfast. So I fast for the first 4 to 5 hours. I'll have water and coffee. And then my first meal will be a light meal, usually around 500 calories. This tends to be like eggs and tuna or eggs and fruit. Now my second meal, which is my dinner meal, will be a big feast, usually around 1400 calories. Now this will always consist of a big serving of meat, rice or potatoes or pasta, and then some vegetables. And then my third meal will be a dessert, usually around 500 calories. So once you find the right meal structure for you and you know what meals you enjoy and the ones that you gravitate towards, I would strongly recommend just eating the same thing every day because variety is just not the spice of life when it comes to nutrition and fat loss. And I'll tell you why. In fat loss, there are two big obstacles that people face. There are two big reasons why people struggle to lose fat. There's tracking, which we already talked about, and then there is adherence. Tracking is just how accurately are you hitting the calorie intake that you need to hit. If you need to hit 2,000 calories every day to lean down, are you actually hitting 2,000 calories or are you eating more like 3,000 or 4,000 calories? That's tracking. And then as far as adherence, adherence is just your ability to stick to that diet, to stick to that deficit day in and day out, 7 days a week, Monday to Sunday, until you lose the fat that you need to lose. If you solve these two things, if you're accurately hitting the deficit, and you're sticking to that every single day, fat loss is guaranteed. It has to happen. And these are the two things that stop people from losing fat. And so the reason why I'm telling you that is because this whole idea of eating the same thing every day, which I also call uniform eating, solves both of these issues. As far as adherence, eating the same thing every day eliminates decision fatigue and makes your diet automatic. And that, in a very real way, increases your adherence to your diet plan. Because why do a lot of people fail when it comes to dieting? It's because their diets consume their lives. It becomes the only only thing that they think about. It's on their mind 24/7, and it just becomes overwhelming. You do not want to have to think about your diet all the time. You want it to fall into the background of your life. That's what makes it, sustainable. That's what gives you the ability to actually stick to it. So uniform eating the same thing every day, eliminates that decision fatigue and just makes the diet automatic. You don't have to think about it. As far as tracking, uniform eating is really the key to making your tracking accurate because you're eating the same things all the time. You know those meals. You've tracked them 1,000 times before. All you're doing is just repeating them. You know that those meals work within the framework, within the calorie intake that you need to hit. And so you're just repeating them every day because you know it works. You're not mixing things up all the time and like constantly having to pull out MyFitnessPal or your tracking software to find out like what foods are like, how many calories in this meal, what are all the ingredients. It just becomes such a pain in the ass. If you know the meals and you just repeat them, it makes things super easy. The power of uniform eating and eating the same thing every day is in knowing that your diet is dialed in without you needing to think about it. Now, for some of you guys, you might be thinking like variety is the spice of life. Like I like eating different meals all the time. That's fine, but it's gonna make it a lot more difficult for you. You might think that this is restrictive, but I promise you it's actually the most freeing thing that you can do. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about what general structure you're gonna follow in terms of how many meals you're gonna eat per day and when you're gonna eat them. And then I want you to find go-to meals that you love and gravitate towards for each of those meal slots and just repeat them daily. And if you need a bit of variety, I'd recommend looking at how many meal slots you have, like maybe it's 3, and find out like 2 to 3 meals that you can just rotate for each of those slots. It's gonna make your life so much easier. The next step is to get a balance of macros. So most people go way too high in protein and leave no room for carbs or fats. Cutting carbs or fats kills your testosterone levels, and this makes it really difficult to build and maintain muscle, makes it harder to stay satisfied, your mood goes to shit, your sex drive drops, it becomes a mess. I promise you, you do not want to cut out carbs or fats. Now, you might have a preference to go a bit higher in carbs and lower in fat, or vice versa, higher in fat, lower in carbs, but just don't cut any of them out completely. I promise you, it's gonna make your life more difficult, it's gonna make you feel like shit. So what I would strongly recommend is that just hit your protein, just like the intake that we found earlier, just hit that, and then just get a balance of fats and carbs. Don't even worry about tracking them. I strongly recommend not tracking your carbs and fats. Don't try and worry about hitting a certain macronutrient ratio split and trying to obsess over that. Hit your calories, hit your protein, and then just get a balance of fats and carbs. Let them fall where they fall as a result of you eating a balanced diet. The next step is to save your calories for later in the day. So as I said, the calorie deficit is what matters. That is what produces fat loss, not when you actually eat. However, when you eat does impact your satiety. So when you eat does indirectly affect fat loss. And so remember, the goal is to go to bed feeling satisfied each night while still being in a deficit. And from my experience, I found that the best way to do that is to eat the most food in the evening. Eating light throughout the day gives you freedom in the evening. And so as you might be able to remember from the example meal structure that I showed you, that like the structure that I found to be the best, it starts with a 4 or 5 hour fast in the morning, and then a light meal, only 500 calories, and then a big dinner meal of 1,400 calories followed by a dessert. So as you can see there, only 500 of my calories are dedicated to during the day. All the rest of the food comes in the evening, and I found that to be the most effective way to structure your diet when it comes to fat loss, because what it does is it creates the illusion of abundance. So let me show you an example. Let's say that you have to do 2,500 calories per day in order to lean down, and I'll show you what that looks like when you're spreading it evenly versus what it looks like when you're saving most of your food for the evening. So in this first example, you're gonna be doing 500 calorie meals, and you're gonna be basically having 5 meals per day spread evenly. If you're someone with a big appetite, I promise you, none of these meals are going to fill you up. You're eating 2,500 calories, but the way that you've stretched them out makes it so that each of these meals just don't do very much for you. And this is the problem that I always had when, I was first getting into fat loss. I thought you had to eat small meals throughout the day because that's what everyone was talking about back then, right? And I just found that I was never full. I could never achieve satisfaction. Now, on the other hand, let's say that you're saving most of your calories for later in the day. So let's say that you do like a 4 to 5 hour fast, like I talked about, and then you eat a 500 calorie meal here, and then in the evening, you have 2,000 calories to work with. This is a much more satisfactory setup. If you're someone with a big appetite, you're gonna need big meals to feel full. Like personally, I need big meals. Small meals do nothing for me. So this setup basically allows me to go to bed feeling full and satisfied each night. It allows me to actually eat big, tasty, satisfying meals while still being in a deficit. And the only way to be able to sort of have this freedom here is to create a buffer. You can't eat 2,000 calorie meals spread evenly throughout the day. You'll just eat way too much food. But if you fast for the first chunk of the day, then you eat light, and then you save most of your calories for the evening, it creates a very good structure that allows you to go to bed feeling full and satisfied each night. The next step is to ditch intensive cardio and walk instead. So walking is the #1 fat loss tool. Walking burns calories and induces a further calorie deficit, which increases the rate at which you lose fat without increasing your appetite like a lot of other intensive cardio forms do. Most cardio forms that people think are like the holy grail of fat loss tend to just ramp up your appetite and impede your recovery. And walking has none of those negative downsides. It has no impact on your appetite and it doesn't impact your recovery because it's low intensity by nature. So a calorie deficit is an energy deficit, and an energy deficit is a recovery deficit. And so if you want to actually end up looking good by the time you lose all the fat that you have, you want to save your energy for what matters most, which is your strength training. The next step is to lift heavy twice per week. So I actually believe in a twice per week training setup, whether you're bulking and trying to put on muscle and strength or cutting and you're in a fat loss phase. The reason though why training just twice per week is so effective when you're in a fat loss phase is because it actually keeps your appetite lower. And so if you're in the gym 4 or 5 days a week trying to lift heavy weights, you're gonna ramp up your appetite so much and it's gonna make it so difficult for you to stay in a calorie deficit. So by training just twice a week, you're gonna keep your appetite lower, and that's going to make it easier for you to sustain the calorie deficit. And by training twice a week, you're also giving yourself more recovery time, which is incredibly important when you're in a fat loss phase, because remember, a calorie deficit is a recovery deficit. You're not going to be able to recover from 4 or 5 hard training sessions per week when you're in a calorie deficit. And if you're not recovering, you're not going to make progress. In fact, you might not only not make progress, you're probably going to reach a state of overtraining to where your body's so stressed out and you're actually going to lose muscle and strength. By training just twice a week, you'll maintain the ability to actually train hard in those sessions and maintain more muscle and strength. The next step is to get locked in. So fat loss is all about gaining momentum. As human beings, we are momentum creatures, and very few people talk about the importance of momentum when it comes to fat loss. But there's this metaphor that I constantly throw around in every video that I make about fat loss, and that I constantly repeat to my clients because it's so powerful. And it's basically to picture a stationary train on tracks, and it basically has 10 feet to go of, just flat track before it reaches a downward slope. This is exactly how fat loss works. Fat loss is all about getting this train out of its stationary physics across the 10 feet and then letting it go. Letting it just ride that downward slope. This is all fat loss is. It takes tremendous effort to get this train out of its stationary physics and to get it moving and to get it across this 10 feet. It takes monumental energy and effort, but once it gets across the 10 feet, it reaches a downward slope and then it accelerates with ease. It accelerates on its own. This 10 feet, how I translate that to fat loss is really the first 2 to 3 weeks. The first 2 to 3 weeks of any fat loss diet is incredibly difficult because your body is resisting the process. It's resisting the calorie deficit. It feels uncomfortable. You want to eat more. But if you just apply a little bit of discipline for those first 2 to 3 weeks, basically the diet's done. Like dieting only really lasts about 2 to 3 weeks before it becomes really easy. You just have to gain that initial momentum. Once you get past the first 2 to 3 weeks and you get locked in, you're done. Like you've gained momentum, you've gone locked in, and it just becomes really, really easy. You just have to ride that wave. It's going to be actually more difficult for you to want to break that wave of momentum once you reach that point. You just need to gain that initial momentum, and then it just becomes super, super easy. You just got to ride the wave. The next step is to change your relationship with hunger. So fat loss is really a mindset game, and a lot of it just comes down to changing your relationship to hunger. I used to resist hunger. I used to think getting hungry in a fat loss phase was a bad thing, but I quickly realized that hunger is actually a sign that you're in fat burning mode. It means you're in the deficit and that your body is burning fat. So I would strongly recommend when you feel a little bit of hunger, do not resist it. See it as a good thing. Learn to embrace it. Learn to enjoy it, and see it as a sign that you're actually losing fat. Because when you start to feel a little bit of hunger, which is inevitable because your body's literally eating itself for energy, like you might be tempted to think that that's a bad thing. You might be tempted to be like, oh, I should probably eat. And honestly, if you're extremely ravenous and you're like starving, then yes, you might want to eat a bit more food because that just might be a sign that you're going too low in calories. But a little bit of minor hunger is usually a very good sign. The clients who win aren't the ones chasing the next free tip. They're the ones who get advice tailored to them, and that's why they move faster, avoid mistakes, and hit their goals. So if you're ready to finally transform your body after 40, click the link in my description below, book your free fit call with me, and lock in your spot.